pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have roll call, please.
Mrs. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Rhodes? Mrs. Underwood?
Here.
Mr. Rodenberger?
Here.
Mr. Wall?
Here.
We are going to continue because of COVID, no public comments. However, we do encourage our stakeholders that if they have a concern or questions, they should direct those to Mr. Morton, and we will be sure that we have them in our hands.
Would this be an appropriate time to address
Yes.
the expiration of House Bill 197? It's set to expire on 12/1. Cheryl and I both this morning got a notification that the House has sent to, it was approved in the House, it has been sent to the Governor's office to extend this through July 1 of 21. It has not been signed by the Governor yet. So this essentially is set to expire 12/1. So what we will do at our December meeting, if House Bill 404 has been signed by the Governor, we will then make a resolution to extend with the way we've done our public commentary based upon House Bill 404 and not House Bill 107. That came out, that was hot off the presses this morning. So we will get that to you as soon as we can. And that takes one less item off of the superintendent's discussion item, unless you think of something when we get it.
All right, thank you. And that moves us to the treasurer's report.
I'm gonna go ahead and move the 5-year forecast up to first, the presentation, if that's okay. Then I'll go over the other items that we have listed for discussion.
put the numbers back to fiscal year 20 numbers to previous to the pandemic, and then applied a factor going forward for increase. Because our assumption will be that hopefully everybody will get back to work. We'll be able to have the income collection back up to where it was pre-pandemic. Any questions on taxes? The next one's in unrestricted grants and aid. This is the biggest change in the forecast that we had from the May forecast. In May forecast, I was projecting a 10% decrease in unrestricted aid funding because that's the information we had at the time from the governor's office of what they thought the projected cuts could be. We actually have found out that we're only getting the decrease that we received in the end of fiscal year 20. So our foundation funding was kept the same as what we received last year for formula items. So the $359,293 that we were discounted in May and June of fiscal year 20 will carry forward to fiscal year 21. There will not be any further reductions. That has a significant impact on the forecast this year, and that has a lot to do with where the deficit spending went from $2 million down to $400,000. It equates out to about a $1.3 million change in revenue receipts. So that's a very positive thing for the district. Moving forward, there's a proposed fair funding module that Mr. Martin will talk a little bit about a little later. But those forecasts, those changes to that funding formula have not been forecast in here. So basically going forward, the only changes that are made to unrestricted aid have to do with changes in enrollment and changes with things outside of the formula. So things like economically disadvantaged right now in career tech, we've actually seen decreases in both of those places, but those won't be reflected in this foundation payment for this year because they're considered formula items. So the formula is not going to decrease. So as those numbers decrease, we don't see those deductions, but we may see them when we go on a different funding model. Things outside of the formula are things like special ed transportation, open enrollment in and out, preschool, which is the other thing that was forecasted a decrease. Right now, with our numbers, we're seeing less children in our preschool, and we get 4,000 per special ed student. So there's been 200,000 has been deducted from collections in this forecast for this year and put back in next year for that decrease in enrollment. Mr. Morton and Mrs. Steyer has been following up with the Northwest Ohio ESC in communication with looking at cutting the expenses there as well. But right now our numbers are still on target to increase, so they're going to wait until July or January, around after the first of the year, to revisit those conversations. With unrestricted aid, we have restricted aid, which is economically disadvantaged in career tech, the things that I just spoke about. That's pretty much flatlined through the forecast because, again, we don't know what those changes are going to be in future years and how those numbers are going to be impacted if we change to a new fair funding model. And even in the fair funding model, my understanding is it'll be phased in over a period of time. So we won't see those changes right away anyway. So, any questions on state aid? And again, like I said, that's our number one funding source. So as that changes, it could impact the district dramatically. Property tax allocation. These are homestead rollback, the tangible personal property reimbursement that we get from the state. And those type of changes are recorded here. If you look at the chart, you can see that we see some decreases in 2023 that has to do, one, with the with the levy having to be renewed, and two, with the fact that tangible personal property will be gone by that period of time. We're still receiving discounted reimbursement for that, but in that year it'll be completely gone. As you can see from the data there, 11.8% local residential property taxes are reimbursed through the through rollback, and 5% is for homestead. All other operating revenues is basically everything else in the district that we collect money for. Open enrollment in is recorded here, so if we do go to the fair funding model, there'll be a change to how this whole category looks, because if they're actually going according to that model and funding kids where they are, that funding will come in under the foundation, not under other. So it's basically forecast using historical trends and one-time payments. We did have a one-time payment this year, and you'll see that come out in 2022, and that has to do with the bond proceeds that we had to record in as a revenue and take out as an expense. All other financing resources has to do with transfers in and out of the account, so it's more of an accounting procedure, moving the funds from one special cost center to another, so it's not actual revenue because it's taken out as an expense. So that is revenue. Does anyone have any questions about revenue? And next is expenditures, and if you go to the next slide, you can see that over 70% of our expenses are in salary and benefits, which you can expect because we are considered a service industry. And then purchase services is the next largest. Going down to the bottom of that screen is the same comparison that you saw for the revenue. You can see the historical, and then you can see the projected, and then the difference. For purchase services, you can see that there was a decrease, but there's a large increase forecasted forward. And that has to do with the fact that grants are taken out in 2020 and 2021 and put back in as an expense in 2022. Supplies and material, you can see there was a decrease, and then there's an increase projected forward that has to do with the fact that we weren't in session from March until June. There was a decrease in spending because there were not as many supplies being purchased at that time because the children weren't in the building. Capital outlay has to do with the fact of the previous 3 years, because the 034 fund, which is the 0.5 mil levy that we have for the construction of buildings, was not allowed to pay for the middle school, high school until it was actually finished and completed. So the expenses that we had to pay out of the middle school and high school are now diverted to that grant. So that's why there's a historical decrease, but in the future we will see increases to the things that we have in, and that's basically bus leases and computer leases and such. So going down to personnel services, the average increase in this is about 4.9%. As you can see in the middle graph, fiscal year 21 was less than 1%. That had to do with the reductions in force that the board decided to make at the end of last fiscal year into this fiscal year. It also had to do with grants that we have that were taken out in 2020 that continue to be taken out in 2021. The reason that 2022 goes up is for the same exact reason, because right now we have student wellness and success that's paying some portion of some people's salaries that fit the criteria of that grant. We only have that grant until the end of fiscal year 21, so those expenses go back in. We won't, of course, see the reduction in force amounts unless those positions are rehired, but we see the increase because of the grant are back in the forecast, and that equates to $289,000 in expense that will be put back in. Forecasting forward is based on trending analysis, forecasting, union contract increases, so on and so forth, moving forward. It does not factor in any new staff unless it's done through attrition. So there's no new staff forecast in this forecast.
Is it typical for there to be other grants that become available to kind of replace the ones that are expiring?
Well, the Student Success and Wellness was a new grant 2 years ago. It's Governor DeWine's project, and we think that it'll be combined with the new fair funding model. to where it won't be a separate grant, but some of the projected increases that we are projected to see in that fair funding model will have taken those grant dollars. So there is a possibility that some of that could be left in that, but it won't be in a grant. You'll basically see increased revenue for the foundation and increased expense for the grant fund, for the grant money coming back in, or the grant expense coming back in the 5-year forecast. I don't think it will remain as student wellness and student success.
I don't either. I think it'll go right into the fair funding formula. And that'll be one of the ways that they can afford to pay for it. But then again, the governor, that was kind of his project on what he wanted to take on to support student wellness and success in districts across Ohio. And so he may want to continue that. So it's all dependent, but highly unlikely, and based upon what the fair funding formula is.
Right now, the student wellness and success is in a fund outside of the general fund, which is why you see those reduced expenses. Employee benefits is going to follow suit in some degree to the changes that are made in personnel because of the retirement piece that's attached to the amount of money that we're paying in personal salaries. It also includes our health benefits. This year, our medical benefit went up 9%. That's effective 1/1 of 21. So we'll see 6 months of that increase. However, since we introduced the high deductible health plan, we were able to decrease that increase to 6.4%. We're saving $155,779 because of the high deductible health plan, and we have 27 staff members that opted to take that plan over Access Plus, which is the more expensive plan. We'll continue to offer that, and hopefully there's been nothing forecast in that more people will join that because we don't know what the usage will be. But we're hoping that we see more people heading in that direction because it saves the district quite a bit of money. Average increases going forward to healthcare are in the range of 8 to 11%, which averages out with other increases to about 6% to 7% across the board moving forward.
What about retirement?
I'm sorry,
What about retirement?
about the cost of it?
What do we as a district provide?
We pay SCRS and STRS.
For STRs?
STRS is the district pays 14% and the employee pays 14% unless they're in a different category in which that portion is picked up by the board.
And then SCRS?
Is 10.
10 each?
10%, yes, each.
Now I'm going to ask you a question here, and I don't know if you'll know the answer or not. But of the 14% that the Defiance City School District pays to SCRS, or STRS, the portion our district pays to the retirement system, how much of that goes to benefit the employee? Because it's taking 14% from each employee, correct? You pay
Correct.
14% for each. It's my understanding that that 14% is being used to pay down debt, not going to the benefit of the employee.
That I would have to research because that's something that
I've heard
STRS
that
would be
as well,
doing.
but I don't think they're gonna go out and publicize that. I
Right.
think the STRS is paying down their debt with what's happening now, because they went through the really dark times for about 5 years.
Yeah, I can tell you that their investment, they lost a lot of investment revenue, which is why STRS used to be 10%, and that's why it's creeped up to 14% over the last so many years. And there have been changes to the requirements to retire, where it now takes you longer to hit that first year. So I know they've made changes to their plan. I'd have to look specifically to see if they're doing anything different than that, but
I also understand that of 14% that the teachers pay, only 10.1% is going to benefit the teacher, 3.9% is going to also pay down this debt.
but that's something if you like to take a look into with STRS, but we basically look at it from the perspective of we pay the 14% to STRS, we're mandated to do that. They don't have an option for what retirement plan they pay into or what the school district portion goes to. But I can look into that if you'd like me to.
If you could.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Any other questions on employee benefits? Next category is purchase services. In fiscal year 20, you can see that there was a significant decrease in purchase services. That has to do with the removal of a typical peer classroom, which cost the district $292,000 in 2019. We also used some of this grant money that we received to offset the cost of preschool because we added back a full day class in 2020. And that continues into 21, which is why you see a smaller increase there as well. That's $290,000. In fiscal year 22, you will see the return of that $290,000, which is why that's more inflated than others. The other major impact of this is utilities. Our utilities were less in 2020 because of the closure of schools in March. So there was less utilities being used in the schools during that time because students were attending. The other one has been, I don't know if you guys remember back a few months ago, we joined Ohio School Plan, which is a consortium for electricity rates. In doing that, we saved $74,193 in fiscal year 20, and we're estimated to receive twice as much of a savings from that in fiscal year 21.
$600 membership to the Ohio Schools.
Definitely panning out, so. Supplies and materials, that kind of follows the same trend line as purchase services because we didn't have teaching in the buildings on those last few months, and also we made a 10% reduction to supply budgets last year in order to try to offset the deficit spending last year, which we ended up accomplishing. Part of that was the 10% reduction in budgets, like I said. We also did not purchase a series of textbooks in 20, and we are not forecast to get a set of textbooks in 21 as well. And then the March closure, I think, all contributed to that decrease in that expense line item. In 2023, you can see there's an increase coming back. In 22, there's a small increase, but in 2023, we forecast starting back up the textbook rotation to buy textbooks, so there's a large increase there just due to that fact. As you can see.
Is there a benefit to having, when you say textbooks, are you talking a physical book?
It depends.
It goes with usually they're paired together, so it's the online and the hard copy. Most companies, you can't just get the online. They throw in gratis the hard copy.
Gratis.
But you still pay the higher price.
For example, if you did a K-5 series, what's an estimate on what that would cost? The K-5 language arts, what would that cost the school district?
K-5 language arts, we just did that, and that was about $200,000.
And if you did a 6-12 language arts?
About the same, a little bit less.
So
it was $350, I believe.
So you could say something in the neighborhood of between $250,000 is a safe way to go, that's what a series would cost.
And math is the next one up, and we haven't purchased math in quite a few years, over 10 years, so it's definitely something that in 2 years we should be definitely looking at.
Yeah.
But if you go with something smaller like social studies, that would probably be about $150,000. But math will be a big one.
Yeah, I think there's a
That's
small
math
amount in
That's math
22.
6-12, correct?
Math
K-12.
K-12.
Okay, so that would be a really big.
It is.
There is a small amount, I think there's 100,000 forecast in 2022 for textbooks, but that's not going to buy a
That's
series.
piecemeal.
Yeah, and then 2023, it goes back up to the 275,000. It's funny that you asked about language arts because that's the most expensive series.
It is. It is.
So everybody should measure lower than that in comparison, hopefully, moving forward, so.
I guess I'm just asking, in your opinion, do you foresee textbooks becoming obsolete in the near future and an online-based textbook being available? I mean, it is now
It
also,
is.
but,
We
I
like.
mean, is there a need to carry the, I mean, to me, it's just a little bit more weight in the backpack that kids doesn't need to carry, you know?
Basically, we use it with the UDL, Universal Design for Learning, where it's the option of the student if they would like a hard copy or not. There's some teachers that keep a classroom set, just in case the internet goes down, as a backup, but like I said, others use it for individualizing with the students. So do I foresee that stopping? I hope not. If it's gratis, if we get it for free, I would hope that we would be able to have something in the classroom as an option.
I don't think it'll ever completely go away. But I think you'll see more of a series. Instead of buying 200 geometry books, you're going to end up buying 75 or 100 of them. You're not going to buy all of them, and then they'll say your licensure for your online version, and of course book companies have gotten smart. They charge you a subscription, and it's updated every year, and that's the direction they're really wanting you to go. But those get out of control really fast, and their subscription fees, their updates. They update something on their end, and it doesn't necessarily work on your 2-year-old Chromebook, and then you're having to update your Chromebooks, and it becomes a big expenditure and a big headache. We ran into that with a couple of textbook series. So
Correct.
we try to keep up with some of the upper level math series that way virtually, but it's hard to do.
There are other sources of information available though, that were a textbook, anymore, what outdates a textbook?
No, I think you're referring to open source. Open source are free items that are on the internet. When I first took over this position, that was my recommendation, is the route we went. So we explored it as a district, and we ran into quite a few hiccups with that. Engage Me Work is one that I still enjoy and I still believe is worth pursuing. However, because it's out of state, it doesn't necessarily match up with our standards. So that's where it becomes the issue. If we had the time to organize it, it would be a great way to go. But it's a lot of teacher work. Whereas with the textbook company doing it, they do the work and we pay for them to do the work. So either way we pay. Either we pay a teacher to do it or we pay a company to do it.
First thing a kid does when they have a question is they Google it.
Right.
That's the first thing they do.
Right.
They get their phone out, they get their Chromebook out, that's the first thing they do. And it provides them ultimate resources. I think if you polled kids, it'd be 50-50 on if they wanted a book or not. I think maybe not quite that 50-50. 40-60 would want one, 60 would say, give me this thing, I can get anything I need. I think the further we go along and the more kids are in tune to using an online version, that number will continue to change and phase out. But until nobody's buying books, textbook companies are going to say, by the way, here's your free books for buying the online subscription, or here's your online subscription for purchasing the books, because we've tried to say we don't want the books. Oh no, they're free. Okay, we just want the online subscription. We want the hard copy. So here you can have your electronic version as well. So.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, I know some teachers, for example, math teachers, when I was teaching, there were math teachers that would teach out 3 different textbooks.
Right.
Okay, they'd have a classroom set, and they'd teach out 3 different textbooks because one textbook provided a better quality of instruction than the one they were currently supposed to be using. And I see that, but now, if you can just maintain, I'm not saying we need to go back to the 2000 and utilize the textbook from 2000 and constantly keep referring to it, but supplementing it with what we have available online without paying anybody.
Well, and our math teachers, speaking of math, our 6th through 12 teachers especially have been without a series for quite a few years, and they've done a phenomenal job of piecemealing it together. However, I don't think, if you look at our math scores, I'm not sure we're doing justice by not addressing it. And that could be addressing with materials and addressing it the way we teach it. And that's where we really need to dive deeper into it. So I don't know if what we have is the best or not, because we haven't explored it yet. It could be, it definitely could be, that what we're doing is absolutely.
I will, it is not the sole source of information in a classroom, and teachers work their tails off to get multiple sources and provide that to kids, and I think that again, secondary math, they've done a great job of preparing. They all have their own classrooms they pulled tremendous amounts of information into it, so.
I'll follow that.
No, that's a good question.
Good question. Any other questions on that? Next one is capital outlay. Capital outlay is anything that we use for the district that can be used to repair buildings, replace equipment, so on and so forth. The biggest two items that we have in capital outlay have to do with our bus leases and our computer leases. You can see that in 2016 through 2018, there were large increases. That has to do with what I said before about the 034 fund not being able to be used for capital improvement on the middle school or high school until the building project was complete. You can see those then decreased going forward. That equivalates to about 1.6% of total expenditure, so it's a small category when it comes to overall expenses. Intergovernmental debt and debt, the only thing that's forecast there is the loan that we have that was taken out, I believe, I want to say 2015 because it was prior to my time here. The good news about this is you can see in 2025 there's a zero payment. That means we paid the loan off in 2024. So moving forward there'll be no loan payment on that. So
As far as the computer aspect is concerned, did I see that the state is looking at trying an initiative to ensure that every child has a device? Is that
Yeah.
okay? And the state's going to provide funds for that?
That would, my guess is that they would, A, get everybody better access to them. The purchase is a large organization, and then B, if you don't have them, then you can buy them at a reduced cost from the state, or B, if you do have them, you can upgrade. And I don't know that they'll be free, but I think they'll be at a significantly reduced cost.
Do we play of this amount here? Is it a large amount of computers or devices for our?
our computer leases run, right now we only have one because we didn't redo the high school because of budget constraints. That runs about 100, they run about 100 to 120,000 each building. So normally we'd have about 240, this year we have 120. And we did get a grant from the state for CARES money to buy technology, and we used it to buy K2 Chromebooks, which we cannot get because of everybody wanting
And everybody in
Chromebooks.
the world wanting Chromebooks.
But we are very close to receiving those, and so we'll be replacing all of the iPads in K2 with individual devices. So at that point, K-12 will be one-to-one devices. Other objects makes up less than 1%. That normally has to do with like everything basically doesn't fall in the other categories like audit fees. And that fluctuates because we receive a lot of one-time payments. This is where we record the expense for the bond proceeds, which I said, revenue, were received as revenue. So it comes out to be zero, but it has to be shown in those 2 years. So that is a breakdown of all of the expenses and revenues for the district. Looking at the very last sheet is the actual forecast, where you see actual 2020 and then through 2025. You can see in there that we are deficit spending every year of this forecast, which me and Mr. Morton and Ms. Steyer have looked at eliminating. And I think that if we can get our preschool numbers to where they are, we'll be able to eliminate a large majority of that. So I think we'll be able to move forward. And the more we do now, the less we have to do later. But overall, you're looking at a $3.4 million deficit in 2025. From the last forecast, which was the May 2020 forecast, which only went through 2024, because 2020 was not complete at that time, so 25 wasn't added. The change, cumulative change over all of that, the 5 years for that forecast and adding the 1 year, was over $4.3 million favorable to the district. So this forecast is better than where we were, but where we were before was a really bad place. So I want to give you a little bit of hope, but not a whole lot, because treasurers don't do that. But
Well, you're right about that. That's
the forecast is looking.
That's on recording too.
The forecast is looking a lot better, but As you know from the changes that you made last year with the reduction in force, eliminating that $2 million in deficit spending that this year was crucial for the success of moving forward with this. We have to get to a point where we can get our revenues to either match or exceed our expenses in order to survive without additional revenue sources. There's only two ways to improve a 5-year forecast, and that's lower expenses or raise revenue. As you can see, a lot of our revenue is out of our control. So that's why the board looks toward expenses. So, any questions overall?
Good job, Cheryl.
Because COVID didn't reach out. For next time, for when the other things I have on my agenda are amended appropriations and amended certificate. This again is just something that I do on about every 3 months to shore up where our expenses are with our revenues and see if we're forecasting forward. We've also received some additional information on some grants outside the general fund which we had to allocate. Specifically in 019, the cafeteria applied for a grant for cafeteria equipment for because of the pandemic and being able to serve students safely, and they were awarded $14,000. And there's also a Gen Youth grant that was applied for when this first started that was $9,000. So those have been appropriated and increased in revenue. And then there's also in the general fund, there's also changes based on the fact we have actual collections for fall of 20 for real estate. So those real estate numbers that are in there now are more accurate than they were in the previous appropriation resolution. So, state bank depository agreements, as I mentioned last month, this is the time where we're going to see those renewals. We have to have a depository agreement with anybody that we have deposited funds with. So that's a standard agreement, but it is a 5-year agreement, so because it's more than 1 year, it needs to be board approved. And you have the attachment there so you can see what all that impacts. We also have the Section 125 plan amendment. The Section 125, I'm not sure if all of you are aware of what that is. That basically allows us to pre-tax our medical premiums. Because we added the high deductible health plan, and we had to add the ability for HSAs, we had to modify that document to include those two things. And then the financial reports that you received are just the USAS financial reports. You can see the summary sheet on those if you have any questions regarding those. I think that is everything on my agenda for discussion.
We ready to go forward here? We have a motion on the October 20 district financial report.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Overland?
Yes.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
And on the 4.2 amended appropriations and certificate for FY21, we have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any other questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Overland?
Yes.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
And on 4.3, section 125, plan amendment,
I'll move on 4.3.
I'll second.
any questions or discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Overland?
Yes.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes. And finally, on the 4.5, 5-year forecast submission to ODE. Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Any questions or discussions on that? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Overland?
Yeah.
You need 4.4.
Yeah, we need a depository.
The depository agreement.
4.5?
4.4, you did approve.
Did I skip 4.4?
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, 4.4.
I'll second.
Any other discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenberger?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Everett?
Now I think we're done with the treasurer.
We are done. Thank you.
You are up, Mr. Morton.
I would duly note that the last meeting that Mrs. Swisher has taken the entire time that it took us to have our complete last meeting. But I'd just like that reported in the minutes, please, Mrs. Swisher. No, thank you. Yeah. I do want to point out to the board, we have a COVID-19 dashboard on our website. When we have to notify families of a positive test of a staff member or a student, we have to notify them, and we notify them electronically, in writing, via email. Some people are not getting those, and it has to do with them registering in Power School. And please contact your building. If you're an elementary child, contact the appropriate office. Middle school child, contact the appropriate office, and high school as well. And then we will get that fixed. We've been able to, we've got about 1,600 email addresses that go out. It eliminates duplicates, so we're slowly getting to that, and it's the most effective way to communicate. But if, I'm gonna actually hop up here and just put it on. You put it on there for me, Sherry, and I'll put it on the smart
It's on the
card.
web.
Yeah.
Is that a requirement by the state? Mr.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is a government-wide
Every school
requirement.
district.
Every school district has to do that. And I went ahead and just put this up. But if you go to our homepage under district news, it says COVID-19 dashboard. That is there, that stays there, that will not be removed. And then it takes you through the steps to get there. Of course, I would love for it to be a one-stop shop. Click here and you can see it. You have to click 3 times to get to this particular page. But I literally have this up on my computer between the health department, myself, all of the building principals, all supervisors. We access our one spreadsheet, and then that's where I pull the data from. And I thought about doing it at the end of the day every day. And what I actually do, I just earmark in my spreadsheet where I'm keeping track, and I try and update it every hour throughout the day. When we were going through a kind of a real hot round of it, it seemed to be better that I keep it updated. And you'll actually see people that can get on and see it. When I'm on it, putting it in there, it'll actually have my little Bowling Green icon, and it'll say Robert Morton is active in this document. So this is on the web, and we've added a couple of categories. I want people to know what our cases in the school district are for students and staff. How many of them are cleared to return? How many students are quarantined because of this, and how many of those are cleared to return? But non-school exposures, and how many students are required to quarantine because of a non-school exposure, and then when they're eligible to return. I just want everybody to know that this data is accessible for them. They have it, and it's something that we update every hour. If there's not a change in it, that means we have no new data to update. But it's something, I think our staff watches it and relies on it, and everybody was nervously putting, kind of trying to see where it was. And then every letter that we send out also is on the COVID dashboard. Anything that we communicate about COVID-19 as it relates to Defiance City Schools is all there, archived by date. And you can see every day, and the letter went out, and identifying what the letter had in it. So if anybody were to ask you questions and you're not sure, please direct them to this. And it's a lot of information, but please direct them to it, okay? Any questions on that? All right. We started remote learning today. And I gave you a copy of the middle school remote learning letter that went to parents, the high school remote learning letter that went to parents, and then the presentation that went over. Most importantly that I could report to you today, I came out and I talked to a half dozen middle school teachers and a couple of high school teachers. And then about 2 o'clock, I got a call from Mr. Carr. I told him, wait till the afternoon, tell me how many kids are in that you haven't heard from today, remotely. And Matt said, you're going to be shocked. there were 8 kids in Defiance Middle School that we did not get a call saying that we were out of town, we couldn't do it, or we didn't have any information. Our internet went out, can you help us out? 8 total in Defiance Middle School. Mr. Jerger had 11 at the high school. And the most common thing I heard from the staff was, boy, it was nice to have all the kids in one spot, because some of them had COVID positive students. Some of them had quarantine kids. They had kids in their classroom. So it enabled them to get everybody back together and have school. I heard 3 times today, walking through the middle school at 10:30, it felt like the first day of school again. Teachers were nervous, kids were nervous, and it didn't go off without a hitch. I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. There were some, a few hiccups that had to take place, and we gave some kids some time off, but we also had 60 children in the building, and that's important to know. We have families that didn't have internet access, or they didn't have anybody they felt it was necessary to have their 6th grader be cared for or have somebody watch them, and we allowed them to come to school. Of course, all our self-contained special ed units were here. So we had kids in the building. They got great attention and great care, so that's important to know as well. But I thought it went really well. I told everybody beware if the novelty wears off. But I think the key thing is that the principals set really good expectations, and the teachers communicated that over a period of days, and they practiced it, and it made it really easy to get through. So I know my daughter said, "Dad, upgrade our Wi-Fi at home, will you please?" That's what she sent me today, and I said, it was fine yesterday. So, any questions on remote learning? We have to annually put it in our board packet, and we have to inform you that we do meet and are compliant with all nutritional standards as set forth under Ohio Revised Code 3313.814, and you have a PDF version of that there, and it gives you what type of beverages that we provide, the volume of it, the calories, and we have to say that we provide this and that this is recorded in our board meeting. Does anyone have any questions on the nutritional standards that we are compliant with? And then I have to add this document uploaded into our compliance for the dashboard by December 1. Interestingly enough, we talked about House Bill 197, and I got a text during the meeting that the governor signed it into law, House Bill 404, into law late last evening, even into the early AM. So we're still going to move on that in our December meeting, okay? And we'll make the changes for that. Something critical that's really come out late, the OHSA medical authorization for return to play of a COVID positive student athlete. Because there is concern with some heart conditions that could come out of a COVID positive student athlete, this is done really at the college level. They did a lot of studying on this. The OHSAA is essentially asking a doctor to sign off on a COVID positive student athlete's medical authorization for return to play. And again, it's just another step that a family has to go through to get to this, and it has to be an MD, doctor of osteopathy, or some sort of, I would imagine that if they could go to a physician's assistant that is held under a licensed doctor, that would qualify as well. And we will have a couple of young people that will have to go through this process here sooner rather than later. Fair School Fund, how many of you have heard a whole lot about it, other than what Cheryl and I talked about? And Tim's been to 7 board meetings, so he's over there going, don't talk about it too long about it. So you all remember the Cupp-Patterson bill that came out and how that could potentially impact school funding. Bob Cupp is the Speaker of the House now, and Representative Patterson is going to term limit out January at the end of January. So they have, for the last 18 months, had a collective group of people, superintendents and treasurers, along with Representative, I've got them here, Representative Patterson, Representative Scher, Representative Cupp, Senator Sykes, and Senator Peggy Leonard from down around the Dayton area. They challenged this group of people to truly dissect what it costs to educate a kid. And here is the whole student model of it, and this is what it does, and then I'll let Cheryl chime in. It doesn't just include instruction on what it costs to educate a child. It incorporates instruction, co-curriculars, professional development, social emotional needs, career readiness, school counselors, building technology. Those are just a few of them. And then you throw English language learners, special education, transportation, all in there, and they literally dissected the entire cost of what it truly takes to educate a child. And it's unique, and I think if Ohio is able to pull this off, you'll see a number of states copy this. I think it's that good. It does benefit the Defiance City Schools in tune of about $2.1 million. I think it's $2,083,000 is what the actual amount is, but we can't get too excited because this is to be phased in over a period of 6 years. And there's a Senate version of it as well, and it'll get modified, I believe.
Is that the phasing in portion? I mean, since you're off.
1991.
They've been trying.
Yes.
So is this phase-in portion what's going to make this different than all the other attempts to try to
So
equally fund education?
the whole point of this was to address the Nathan DeRolf case of 1991. And they truly believe that phasing this in, well, the phase-in portion is simple, so the state can afford it. That's really the phase-in component. And giving, Governor DeWine in his next biennial budget the opportunity to budget for that. And then if he's the governor after that, or whomever the governor is, them an opportunity to plan and budget for that moving forward. So that's how it's, why it's a 6-year phase-in. But it is ultimately to address the DeRolf case of 1991. That's what it boils down to.
And I think the fact that the phase-in's involved is what's
Yes,
maybe different from all the other
Absolutely.
attempts to.
the number one thing that Cheryl and I were talking about, I said, Cheryl, will no longer be a pass-through. And explain to the board and the public what it means when I say we're no longer a pass-through and how this would benefit you as a school treasurer in addition to the school district.
It's kind of, I touched on a little bit in the 5-year forecast, where we have categories where something comes in as an expense and then goes out or comes in as a revenue, goes out as expense, and open enrollment being one. Community schools, scholarships, community schools. When we're looking at what it costs Defiance to educate a child, it's skewed because of the fact that we're receiving money that isn't ours and we're having money sent away that isn't ours. So I think this makes it a little bit easier because the money we receive is going to be to educate the children that we serve. There'll be no exchange of tuition. There'll be no exchange of having to do contracts and so on and so forth, back and forth. I mean, there's still going to be a need to track those for demographic reasons. But I think it streamlines the process in knowing what exactly your revenues are, what exactly your expenses are. And there's also the confidence that you can assure the public that we're paying to educate our kids.
Correct. And that is a really big proponent, and they went over that in our webinars.
So will that include, like with the open enrollment, if you have a special needs student open enrolled to another district, you end up with extra costs attached to that, do you not, or no?
Right now, if we have a child who's a Defiance resident, who's open enrolled to another district, we get billed what they call excess costs.
Right, okay.
So the problem with that is that we have no control over how they spend their money.
Right.
So it may cost them $27,000 to educate that child, where it may only cost us $17,000. But we have to pay them their rate. And that's a lot of the thing, I think, the pushback on those type of exchanges and charges, because we can't control where other districts spend on their programs.
But that would help us.
That would, because what we would
Being
do is that child, that student would be funded at the district they attend, not the district, not taking money away from
Right.
the district where they reside.
Which is a good thing.
But it also works a little bit away from open enrollment, isn't it basically trying to say, I want you to stay within your district? Because if this child does go to another district and the cost to service that child is much higher than would be at Defiance, the district, are they going to be required to accept that child?
I do open enrollment now.
So they can deny it and the child can still end up right back where.
And we experience that now.
Right.
On special ed in particular.
Yes,
So,
many districts won't accept special ed students
So
because of.
then the
what-
argument's going to be, what's going to be the best environment for the child to be in, and then that argument's going to
Yes.
be put forward, that will have to be probably held at some point.
Well, and the other piece of that has to deal with local share, what the local taxpayers pay. It's different in other districts. So that factors into the cost. So we could be paying more to other districts that have a lower local share.
and as you recall, in Ohio, there are school districts that are funded, it's all on property wealth right now. That's how everybody is funded, 0 to 100%. And this changes that funding from a combination of property value and income in the community. Because obviously, if you have the ability, if your community has a higher income, then they have the ability to support local school districts better than somebody that doesn't. And that they take all of those factors into account. And they have this gigantic spreadsheet that when you click on a cell, the formula is. And I quit clicking on that because it was getting a little too much for me. But I think what you're going to see in action items is a resolution in support, and I'm going to recommend that to you. And we have a resolution to support, and then we will draft, and there's copies of the letters to Representative Riedel, Senator McCulley, and then also Governor DeWine, that once we approve the resolution, we will draft, and Cheryl will send those as early as tomorrow. So, okay? And as with this gets worked on and gets settled, we'll get you an exact, and we'll do a presentation and go through it that way as well. Sherry, on 5.7, you want to talk about the speech language pathologist contract with the ESC?
Yes, the speech and language pathologist that serves 3 through 5, grades 3 through 5, is on leave. I made 4 phone calls and was unsuccessful at getting a substitute. So we've contracted, or would like to contract with the ESC. There's one individual that is in-house, meaning that she's coming face-to-face, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. And then another individual that is taking over our virtual, which she does, there are 8 students that are virtually, and she does speech and language therapy.
And again,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
It goes, our employee is set to return January 12th as of now.
The contract will look as if it's through the entire year, but it's a per day, and when she returns, then obviously we're not paying the contract.
How many students are serviced by this?
The face-to-face is a little over 50, and it's about 8, it depends. There's one individual that might be coming back, so between 8 and 10 virtually, and a little over 50 face-to-face.
Those are kind of hard to find, right?
Oh, so hard, yeah, so hard.
Is there any way that some kind of agreement could be made with, say, Mercy or ProMedica for their speech therapists that are available to patients there that might?
I think the rate would be higher. It's my understanding that if, and I don't know this for a fact, but it's my understanding that if you're a speech and language pathologist in that setting, the rate is much, much higher.
I just didn't know if maybe how they assign their speech and language therapists, if it would be like, I can give you 4 hours a day, and then work something.
Something worth exploring, certainly.
Absolutely. I can tell you that I did observe the other 2 that we have, and we have phenomenal speech and language pathologists. I mean, both of them did an exceptional job in the therapy sessions I saw. But we could always use extra help. I mean, because on your caseload to have 60, I remember, well, when I first came here, there was up to 80 on a caseload, which we never want to get to. But I still think having 60 students and serving them well is a little difficult. But our speech and language pathologists do a great job.
Hey, while you're on a roll, Sherry, we're going to talk about Section 504, identifying and serving eligible students. policies and guidelines.
This is a document that has been around town. Tammy Elwood is the one that actually generated this one. I've asked her to update it. She changed the contact information to me as the contact person. There are only other two other changes. One is with section 504, we're not required to have timelines, but it's recommended. And so what we did, we added in a 30-day timeline. We'll follow the same as a student that's special education, just doing it in the 504. The other change is on weapons. If a child comes with a weapon and is on a 504, we may, it's not required, but we may have an alternative setting for 45 days in order to determine the manifestation determination. But those are the only changes. Tammy did an excellent job. Like I said, this document has been around for a while. I'm not sure if we've ever brought it to the board or not. It does follow policy and it does follow federal and state law
Thank you.
and board policy. Did I say that? I think I did.
Any questions for Sherry regarding section 504 policies and guidelines? Last but not least, we have a few dates looking ahead. We're heading into our Thanksgiving break beginning Wednesday. And if you recall, we'll still be remote learning the 30th through the 4th, returning to in-person learning on the 7th. We do have a board meeting here on our only December board meeting, December 9, 5 p.m. And we'll have an exciting agenda for you that night. I'm going to have Cheryl re-present her 5-year forecast. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. I've gooned her all day about it tonight, but I won't do it anymore tomorrow. We have our holiday break, our Christmas break, the 23rd through the 3rd, and then we come back January 4th. And our semester ends January 8th, and then we're into our reorganizational meeting. So if you mark your calendar to those, I know you'll all have them. So I have no further discussion items, Mrs. Davis.
So we're going to move on, and we need action items. 6.1,
I'll move on.
that's the fair school funding, by the way.
Yes.
I'll second.
Any questions or concerns here? Roll call.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Overwood?
Yeah.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Okay, the speech language pathologist contract with the ESC at 6.2. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move. I'll second.
Any questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Overwood?
Yes.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
And on 6.3, the section 504, policy and guidelines, I think it's a good idea that we formally approve that as well.
I'll move on 6.3.
I'll second.
Any questions on that item? Roll call.
Mrs. Overwood?
Yes.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Okay, that's going to take us to the consent agenda, which entails approval of our October 26th minutes. We've got some donations to accept, the maternity leave, various employments, substitute teachers through the ESC. Does anybody have a need to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Not sure about that volunteer freshman basketball. I was gonna bring that up also.
Well,
Thought maybe.
I thought maybe, he came home the other night and he's like telling me, how it's going. And I said, are you the next Phil Jackson? And he said, I hope so. I absolutely hope so. I said, follow his career path. It wasn't easy for him to get where he went. So, no, he enjoys it. He thoroughly enjoys it. Probably end up, right now he's a marketing and theater major, and I have a feeling he's going to end up being an education. I think he's going to end up being a teacher when it's all said and done. Not a bad vocation. His mother and I do it for a living.
Right.
So,
Is the fellow who's going to be the head coach for freshmen, did he used to play at Ayersville?
yes, he and his brother both.
Thought I recognized him.
And he's got Cooper, and one of the reasons that Brent asked Cooper to help out is that Coach Travis's job, he doesn't get off work until 3, and for him to get changed and get here, he just needed a responsible adult to be prepared.
Well, if I may,
Go ahead.
I will comment on both those two individuals. My boys are freshmen, and you know, when they were presented with their coaching staff, I said, "How do you like the coaching? You know, like every, you know, your coach is all right." Yeah. And I said, "So what do you think the coach Travis?" They said, "He knows his stuff. You know, he knows his stuff." He says, "Both my boys are taller than him, but he knows his stuff." You know? And I said, "Well, what do you think about Coach Morton?" He asked some of the best questions that I mean, if he didn't ask the question, I would have never thought about it. And so
Good.
they enjoy being around
Wonderful.
these guys. So, I mean, for freshmen to get that kind of an introductory experience in a high school sport,
That's awesome.
that's good.
Yes. So is magic his real name?
Yes, it is. That was the first question I asked him. He said, my mother was a huge Magic Johnson fan growing up, watching him play for Michigan State and then for the Los Angeles Lakers. That is my real name. And I've been asked that a million times. And I said, good to meet you, Magic.
Yep. That's awesome.
He's coached AAU basketball and high-level AAU basketball literally all over the country. And from Ayersville, Ohio. So,
That's awesome.
Well, the freshmen, freshmen last year, I know, boys did not have an extensive schedule because a lot of other opponents didn't have the potential to, like I used to call, what I used to call that, when we go and have 3 games.
yeah, the triple header.
We didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of students available to play.
Right.
Oh.
We ran into a big problem with that, because we had a whole,
Moved up.
basically, we lost a whole class in playing basketball.
Uh-huh.
Now, because we had to play a whole bunch of younger kids last year, we'll handle that a lot better this year,
Uh-huh.
I think, don't you, Gary?
Yes, yes.
Anything else on the consent agenda? No?
Motion to
Good.
approve.
There we go.
Oh, I did have one. On the donations, I noticed that a lot of, you know, recently at meetings, a lot of the donations have been going for the video board, which led me to think, well, not as many people are gonna see the video board this year. And I wondered and have been asked about the possibility of games being streamed, you know?
Interestingly, you should bring that up. The company, through the National Federation of High School Sports, they installed our camera and our sound system in the gymnasium on Friday.
To
Now,
do that.
Yeah, so, and our tech people have some things that they have to do to wrap it up. Then they have to go back, and then there is actually, will be a streaming website for Defiance City Schools, and I don't know what it is yet. So,
Okay.
it'll be something /Defiance, but it'll be our events.
Oh.
And it's free, make that clear, it's free. And this company, they will seek revenue from advertisers, that's how they're able to make it free for all of us in our community.
Awesome.
Yeah, that FHS, not just, they've been doing this, it's just taking them time to
Yeah.
work through the nation.
We actually have it, we'll have it available on our football field, but that was where it was supposed to start, but they were overwhelmed. Again, COVID shut them down just like everything else in March, April, May, June, and then they had June and July and part of August to try and Jerry said the guy came and he got here about 7 o'clock on Friday morning and he left here at 6 p.m. Because he said, I'm not coming back.
And if you're ever interested, nfhs.org, they have a great resource for everything involved in athletics. And when I'm talking athletics, they include band, they include all sorts of different
It's a really good
organizations. It is.
I think Jeff gets correspondence from them as an umpire.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
Yeah.
Have to take a lot of our certifications through that
Like
organization.
the concussion training,
Yeah, everything.
Well, that's good, so, what else? Something like that. I forget what I was gonna say, sorry. But yeah, people are, you know, really starting to think about that.
Yeah.
Well, I know I can't come, so.
We'll get that out there and I'll see if you can have guest commentators. You're interested for the first game, Chris?
Probably not, but probably better not. For the enjoyment of the.
Actually, we actually requested an upgraded system, again, at no cost, because we wanted the sound to be able to be the sound of the gymnasium. So you'll hear the whistle and the coaches and the pep band, and you'll hear it through the broadcast. It won't just be a screen with nothing happening. So we asked for that. It had to be piped into our PA system, and that was a little more work for the guy, but he said, I'll do it, I'm coming, I'll do it one day.
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry if I stole your thunder for later.
No,
I'll touch on that
No.
later.
it will be, I will ask if it's my daughter, if it's okay, can that be my excuse to not go watch her cheer? She'll say, nope.
What is the capacity? Is it a percentage?
It'll be the same as it was for indoor for volleyball.
Oh, okay.
So we'll end up, I think it was 250 on the home side and 160 on the visitors. That was so long ago, I don't remember. 15%, how's that? It's a little bit more for basketball though, because our seating arrangement's different than it is for volleyball, so there'll be more. I think it might have been 250 and 100 for volleyball, now it's 250 and 160. Because we have the two ends to add into the total amount.
And that will still go with family and loved ones
Yeah,
and.
it's the same thing.
Okay.
We are,
Although 250 seems pretty wide, a very large number.
yeah, 250 is, the home side seats about 625 people, and the visiting seats about 700. And I think that's, I think that's what it was, 250 for the home and 160 for the visitors. And we're going to include our pep band because they're going to spread out in that end one and be able to have the pep band.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good.
What about the crazies? They're gonna be.
Well, I think the pep band's going to have to double as the crazies.
Okay.
And at
Or
least
you can do that,
temporarily.
Gary.
We're going beyond the scope of where we're at here.
Yeah,
Motion to approve.
yeah.
Can I have a second, please?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Who gave me a second?
Michael.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Overland?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Thank you, guys. Okay. Do we have any old business?
I once again would like to thank the teachers and the coaching staff and everybody involved with these kids right now. I know it's a difficult time to go into this remote learning, but I think our kids have been prepared well enough, at least from my perspective. My children were up ready to go at 8:30 this morning, and they were prepared. They knew exactly what the routine was going to be. And I also would just hope that we do our best to kind of curb this, because I definitely want to see a spring season. I don't want these kids to miss a second spring season that will ruin softball and really impact baseball. So just appreciate everybody doing their part, and thank the administration and all the teaching staff for the hard work that they're putting in.
And on top of that, I think we need to give into Mr. Beauty for
Yes.
doing an outstanding job of keeping control of all of this in the athletic realm. Because he truly did a great job for us, and thankful for that. I think we're further along than what I would have anticipated with it, but thankful we got through one season. I think we're going to get through another one. I think when spring comes, we have high possibilities with vaccines coming and whatnot. So very proud of our kids and our staff and all concerned for doing a phenomenal job, just doing a phenomenal job. So we can't say enough. On a last note, we did not have a recognition for our support staff this year
Right.
because of COVID. So I want to take this opportunity to express to them publicly our appreciation of what they do for our district and our kids. It does not go unnoticed, the extra distance these staffers do for us. And I don't care if it's making sure kids get bowling money or helping them with any issue. They have really done an outstanding job. Our bus drivers, aides, cafeteria, all of our custodians, all of them just do a phenomenal job. And I'm contributions and just want to take a moment to recognize them as we have not been able to formally do so this year thus far. Anything else?
I'm a firm believer in that, it's kind of a saying that you hear on a lot of the Ohio briefings and Spectrum News, about the, so goes the community, so goes the school district. Now,
Yes, right?
yeah. I hope that, you know, our community continues to be a example to kids in school. So we really truly can have all these things we are hoping for.
Anything else? Any new business? Ah, well, a little behind from last time, but being no further business, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.